I grew up in Taiwan, but then I studied overseas in the United States, Belgium, and then South Africa. So by profession, people think I'm a curator, art critic, a professor of architecture. And but whenever I work in Taiwan, I do cultural management. So for instance, for C-Lab or TAICA, Taiwan Creative Content Institute, I work as the board director. So we manage how to invest governmental funds in creative contents or cultural activities in the name of public institutes. So for C-Lab, it's the most experimental futuristic studio our government spent and founded it 4 years ago. So for me, it's very difficult to describe what I am, but I've been working in 5 continents in more than 40 countries. And so I always chose to stay with those territories of minority languages, ethnicities, and also being the frontier for lots of confrontations.
You told me about cultural diplomacy.
Yes.
What does this expression mean?
Mm-hmm. So in the past, the conventional diplomacy will involve more like political or economic exchanges, or to found like alliance together due to the profits of economic or political reasons. But then we move on to the digital diplomacy. Like we might have the Schengen visa together, or to have like some agreement treaties, like to exchange database to prevent crimes, or to encourage more beneficial agreements. But nowadays we realize since it's a global society, we work together via internet all the time, and then we try to create a coalition of the coalitions. Then we have to avoid to make differentiation among different groups, nationalities, or even like the genders and so on. So to focus on the cultural contents, to encourage to create a binding among different like cultural groups, cultural agencies, by ignoring the differences, then it will be the future. So cultural diplomacy will also work much better for a small country like Taiwan. Otherwise, if we stick to the superpowers or standardization of systems, organization like the UN or NATO, then all these minority countries, languages, people or subcultures would be compromised. But cultural diplomacy will encourage the diversities. So I think Taiwan has a great future and a very strong standing point if we focus more on cultural diplomacy.
Everyone is afraid in Italy, in Europe, in the democracies in the world about the destiny and the future of Taiwan. What do you think?
Of course, I'm a Virgo. I always worry too much, but at the same time, Taiwan has always been as the last frontier, because lie in between two hemispheres, among different oceans, and in between different continents. So I have all the faith in a country like Taiwan. Because if you think, let's take a good example, like the island, the Greek island Crete. Crete is located in a very similar location, but if we dig into the history, Crete, instead of being compromised or taken over by Egypt, Roman empires, or Greek states. Instead, it influenced all the others, including like the Islamic world and so on. So if you have you could envision the Taiwan playing the same role, instead of being conquered and compromised by major powers. Maybe Taiwan could be another Crete in Asia. And the other similar island, since I work in Africa before, I would say that it is very similar to Zanzibar. The island outside the Eastern Africa has also to do with lots of Italian immigrants and so on. Zanzibar is such a small island, but it plays the similar role in a way to prevent the Arabic or the Sultan history being disappeared. So I think, yes, I'm worried if everybody being so radical and then make a very silly decision by military force, or thinking that they can bully like a country like Taiwan just by force. But if you think, Taiwan has all the strengths, being the only territory in greater Chinese communities, from like Canadian or Brazilian Chinese community up to the European communities. Then if you think it's the only territory enjoys the total freedom of speech, creativity, religion, migrations, and so on. So,
which is the identity of Taiwan now? Because what do you answer to people say it's part of China, or people say it's just an island?
I always believe in the power of minorities. Okay, so especially dated back to like 2008, is confirmed by like UNESCO because of the database for genetic codes, and they discovered that among all the Austronesian territories, so when we talk about from the Hawaii Island, Easter Island, New Zealand, up to Madagascar, all this region, the roots of the genetic codes came from Formosa, Taiwan. So I think it's a very good example to explain how Taiwan, or all these Austronesian islands, thousands of them, survived with own ethnicities, conventions, and also, but they share the same routine. So maybe we should go back to the old days, just like if we talk about the Asian islands, they are all different. So definitely, it's a confrontation between the continental mentality and the oceanic mentalities. So for me, Taiwan is very unique. It's not because it's a major island. It's because it really enjoys all the good conventions from the continental tradition. And so we'll enjoy like the efficiency and like the scale of the markets. But at the same time, any ethnic group from an island will be very versatile, will be very liberal, because we have to adapt to different differences and have to try to make the most out of it, out of the climate, of the land, of the communication, transportation. So maybe it's like this. We never really give up on like agricultures, because that's where the binding for land ethics lies. But at the same time, we know that without communication, without adapting to changes, we can never really survive well. So we also challenge ourselves with technology. And we take charge of technology in order to communicate, to move around. So if you can balance these two extremes, technology, science, and ethics and traditions well, then I think there's nothing to fear. I think we try to create a spectrum. Everybody can find the frequencies and to get enlightened and to communicate. But we have to keep the balance like the pendulum, from one extreme to the others, but we create different rhythm. And also to work with like mainland China, it's just like maybe dancing tango or like playing Tai Chi.
Have you worked in China?
Yes, because I was in China very early, even before Deng Xiaoping opened it up. I represented different INPO or NGO, mostly to help the museums to get modernized. Because at this time, at the beginning of the 90s, or especially up to maybe 1997, 98, the whole world welcomed China, just like when I was working in Europe at the very beginning. European community was welcoming the Middle and Eastern European countries just left the USSR. It's in the same atmospheres. So they were so eager to learn, also eager to rejoin the whole the international community. So people knew, even the Chinese government bureaucrats, they knew they had a lot to catch up. So they were not only open and also very modest. But maybe the economic success was booming and too fast.
Taiwan identity maybe is a work in progress. Is also always in progress. Is always in progress. Is a melting pot.
Mm-hmm.
We can use this expression.
Yeah, it's ever in progression. It's true. If you think, like Austronesians would be dated back to 40, 50,000 years ago. But it's not the same all the time. So I wouldn't say the Hawaii Island people are the same as from Madagascar or Taiwan. So in the same principle, even some of our ancestors were really from mainland China, dated back to even 2,000 years ago. They kept on moving from the north to south, and then eventually they arrive in Taiwan. But then they also make a move to the other continents, other places. So if, like, for instance, this year in Tainan, the old capital city, they are celebrating the 400 years of Dutch immigrant to Taiwan. Of course, it's intriguing for me. Why do we celebrate the beginning of being colonized? But if you think, dated back to 1624, VOC, or shall we say the Dutch imperial time was at its peak. It's the most powerful time. And they created the New Amsterdam in the same year. Now it's called New York. Why don't we also respect Taiwan could be evaluated at the same level when Dutch colonial government tried to establish a new territory in Far East. At the time, of course, it's named Formosa. So if we could try to create a bilateral way to, or it's like to remember the history doesn't follow only one line. So it's true, I never really enjoyed being colonized, especially like during the Japanese colonial time. It was so tragic, including my family had to, in a way, if we didn't want to give up our family names, we could not receive proper education and could not really receive the subsidy. So my family had to move to Manchuria. It's simply because it's the most international. Otherwise, you could only change your family name, and you could only be educated in Japanese. There's no choice. But in a good way, it's not because Manchuria is also mainland Chinese or also part of Japanese territory. It's because it's international. Taiwanese people through the history were very brave on moving abroad, but they always return to Taiwan. This is very different. So for instance, I always find Italians so similar to Taiwanese. For instance, Lady Gaga, she's the fifth generation of immigrant, but she would still say, I'm Italian. But if you talk to German, Polish immigrants, they were not really that insistent about their rooting. But Taiwanese, even they've been to Brazil, immigrated to Brazil after 5 generations, they will still say, we are Taiwanese. So maybe that's part of the ethnicity.
It's not nationalism.
No. Yeah.
It's something different.
It's totally different. And so for me, it's so touching. When I was working in New Caledonia, I was so surprised, taken by surprise when they received me, and we exchanged gifts made of textile, and so we greet each other's ancestors. So the director of the National Cultural Institute, designed by Renzo Piano, he said to me that he was so emotional because finally he met somebody from the motherland, and it became, and I was in tears. I think Taiwanese people were so obsessed by getting the international recognitions by and especially by super nations, and we tend to forget that actually in terms of ethnicity and also the cultural geography, we are already recognized as a motherland by lots and lots of all these island countries. It's a mistake, to think that only the major countries represented UN or NATO could decide if we are a nation or not. A country should be recognized by its values, but not by its size or so.
Vous êtes
Cécile Wang, je prends le charge pour le Taiwan Sound Lab et je vous présenter un peu cet espace. C'est collaboré avec ICAM Centre Pompidou en 2018 et après toutes les années, on a des échanges très étroits et notre lab, la mission est focus vraiment pour la formation et l'éducation et aussi coproduction, mais bien sûr aussi important, on voudrait encourager les artistes à travailler interdiscipline et puis prendre une conscience, la musique et le son est vraiment un médium important pour la création contemporaine.
I'm the sound designer from C-Lab, Taiwan Sound Lab. I work with the artists and I design or compose the contemporary music in Taiwan Sound Lab and cooperate any different artists or team to co-work different work. I study before I'm the percussion player, and after I studied the electronics composer in Taiwan.
Hi, I am the project manager of Sound Lab. So I work with different artists, musicians, composers, and visual artists. Seed Lab used to be a military spot, and now it has transferred into like a space for like exhibition, like art movement, and different like art activity for the audience. It started from 2018, so it's been 5 years. So there's some like major changes in Taipei and for this space too.
Everybody is just like a teacup. So if you learn hard and you are cultural, or so maybe when you arrive in a foreign land, maybe it's a third country, you already keep a teacup 80% full. But if I empty it, at least I can get another 80% from the indigenous or the local new communities. Otherwise, at most I could only get 20%, from on top of what I have. So I really think the whole world has to learn from the others, and don't make anybody similar, the same. It's not only boring, it's criminal, because if you wipe away all these differences, then the mother nature will fight back. There are different items to follow, but the last one is really the most important: how to create the coalition of the coalitions. Nobody wants to be like the others. We want to be ourselves, but we have to work together.